last week. What was the discussion that we had on that?
I just started the recording. Welcome everyone. This is the Cluster Addons meeting. Today is Tuesday, the 2nd of March. I'm just checking if we have. So we have Google Summer of Code on the agenda today. We discussed it last time as well. Does anyone have any updates?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have any updates, but it just seems like the primary effort that we would be working on would be just efforts around manifest bundle and centralizing or providing like a community resource in place for those bundles to be indexed. So I definitely see that work as something that could be quite important as a building block for sharing sources, objects, and configuration in a cloud native way. Could be pretty compelling to work towards getting a GSOC proposal for manifest bundles, but this is really just about what the group thinks as far as supporting that effort. Is this just like a temperature check? Like we've been at the cluster add-ons effort now and produced some meaningful things over the past, year and a half. Where is everyone on priorities? What are we still looking to get out of this effort? Where are things going? That kind of.
Was that a question, Lee? Do you want people to comment on where like that, or not? Sorry,
yeah, I suppose I didn't prompt explicitly enough. Yeah, I mean, sure, Justin, if you have comments on my posited inquiry.
Yeah, it sounded like someone else was talking, so I didn't want to talk over them, but I can go otherwise. I mean, I think for me, I think that the thing I really want to see happen is like for us to get it into, from my perspective, KOps, but like other tooling generally. And I feel like that will be when a lot of our hard work sort of pays off and we sort of start to see it used in reality. So that's where I'm very much focused. And I don't know to what extent that's something that a GSOC person can necessarily address. But that's what I'm really working on myself, and hopefully that will yield dividends for all of our work.
Prakash, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to know, are there any interns who are going to participate from our side in this cluster add-on areas for GSOC?
So it looks like next week only the organizations will be announced. And after that, it will be our turn to put in a proposal for a project, or many proposals if we have enough mentors. But right now it's not even clear that, I mean, it's very likely, but it's not announced yet that the CNCF will participate as a project. So we're well ahead of schedule right now.
Okay, thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, I can share the link to the timeline. So it's going to be a couple of weeks still. What does it say? It says the students will only be announced in May 17th. So quite a while until then.
I certainly see like a lot of opportunities as well. Prakash, if you have ideas about things that you would like to see happen with like something that is approachable for an intern type individual, like Satoshi was last year, to be successful in a mutual kind of partnership with this group. Come up with those ideas. Let's get them documented so that we can propose them. And if you'd like to be involved, in reviewing or mentoring, just yeah, let us know.
Yeah, sure. I am looking at cluster API in relation to OpenStack provider. So
Okay.
if there is anything that comes up there, like I'm thinking, like what happens, example, okay, I'll just give you, if you give me a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you have a design, let's say for data centers, and you have OpenStack being used, and you have Kubernetes being used. So whether we are doing OpenStack over Kubernetes, or we are doing Kubernetes over OpenStack, the two camps are there, and you deal with Kubernetes at the cluster level, okay, but you deal with the multiple cluster at cluster API level. So the issue is, should a design of cluster API be single cluster to connect hundreds of data centers, like a campus data centers, or should it be focused on multiple clusters? And if we do multiple cluster, what is the definition of a cell? What is the definition of availability zones? And what is the definition of cell in itself? Is it cell 1, 2, 3, 4, or is it cell? And the concept of cell is a bit confusing to me, in the sense that you do have cells in OpenStack called cell 2.0, etc. Whereas, so I have assigned to two of the students in one of the universities in India to investigate into it, and if possible, we'll see how we can connect that. So goal is, can I have a proper definition of what is the control of clusters? Should it be based on both being loosely coupled, in the sense that Kubernetes clusters keep themselves, OpenStack keep themselves, only VM based? So what is the advantage and what should we focus on? That's what I'm trying to arrive at. I don't know the answer, but if I am able to articulate it correctly, then only I should get in. But I will try my best, what I can do.
Thanks for a little bit of that overview. I have not thought about OpenStack in quite a long time, and certainly, there are many large environments. You're probably working in one of those. So I took some notes just on a little bit of what you're talking about.
So just to give you the background, like CERN uses OpenStack as the baseline, where you have Kubernetes being used inside the VMs. And we want to go the other way around, like you use Kubernetes as the control plane and management plane, and then focus on OpenStack containerized version, and then go with that concept. How will it turn out? Or should it not be either way? Should it be OK or KO or neither of the two? That's the dilemma I have, and I want to get that cleaned out if I can. And if it,
I know that there was an old project. A friend of mine, Brandon Josa, his handle is Vicodin with like alternating leet speak in it. He used to work on a project called OpenStack Helm, which is a fairly mature Helm chart that packages OpenStack to be able to run on top of Kubernetes. And I think they demo actually a live migration on top of an OpenStack installation on top of the Kubernetes cluster. But this raises like kind of the question of packaging needs. That's a little bit of where the crosstalk happens here. The design of this. So you mentioned that you were already working with some interns to kind of help them contribute in the area of the kind of topology and infrastructure design considerations, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
very
Brandon
cool.
Johnson, you mean Brandon Johnson from Linux Foundation? I think
No, his name is Brandon Josa. Josca. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
OpenStack Helm, Brandon. Yeah.
Okay.
If you look
Okay.
up.
I will try locate and if I can get some advice from you. Certainly.
Yeah, that
Thank you for
might
the
be a breadcrumb. I'm not sure if the project is still maintained, but it was 2 years ago. So, and it's, yeah, very non-trivial set of package charts. If your students need support with regard to packaging, they certainly could bring up those topics here, join the call, we can talk through that. And that's really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, from my perspective, for sure, is what I would like to see is I really should be contributing more to the specification for the manifest bundles. Inspiration being that in Flux v2 we have source controller. Source controller is responsible for fetching all of the things into a format that the other reconciling type controllers like customized controller and Helm controller inside of Flux, they basically talk to source controller storage and are able to use the artifacts there. Right? And so this allows us to have a nice separation and support for the OCI bundles, right? Or the Docker manifest images, inside of Flux would be, I think, quite powerful, particularly for better metal installations. But that's not the only use case, Anyway, definitely interested in, that's a new area of work that could develop. This is something that, if we had the spec by summer, we could potentially work with the right Google Summer of Code candidate. So that's it's a possibility.
So is Prakash here, sorry for to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just to understand, so you do have cryo right now, but not OCI. Is that what you're referring to in this case, in the Flux video?
So Flux doesn't really interact with CRI, the container runtime interface, but it does operate with some OCI registry interfaces, like the Docker distribution, style API for container images. Right now, that is primarily APIs that work with image tags and image repositories or registries.
I see.
There's currently no support for the Helm OCI charts because those packages inside of Helm 3 are still internal. But once the Helm team does make those GA, we will likely add OCI Helm repository support to source controller. And this is the same place where for the manifest bundles that primarily Nick has been driving as of lately, which is storing things like YAML files or customize directories inside of a container image. Kind of support for that inside of source controller from Flux would be powerful, because you would no longer, it gives you another option, that's not a bucket or an HTTP server or Git repository or Helm repo. You can package artifacts in a lot of different formats, sign them, validate those signatures, that kind of thing. So
Thank you.
that's kind of what's certainly a motivating thing for me to continue staying involved with cluster add-ons.
So I have some like strawman stuff around manifest bundles and OCI as pertains to the stuff we were talking about before. I'm not really ready to share that yet. I got a little bit more busy than I thought I was going to be with work stuff, but I'm targeting the next add-ons meeting to have stuff publishable. I'm going to try to share it with you earlier on, or share it with the channel. So maybe we could all sort of put comments and stuff on it.
Yeah, I think that's been a successful strategy for collab, like async collab in the past, when we did the very original like operators and packaging document. So when you're ready, for any feedback, I think we're all reachable from that channel.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I apologize for taking so long. I got busier than I thought I was going to.
No apologies necessary. I think you've gone above and beyond to actually take any ownership of the work. So thank you. No rush. If you're still on target to share in 2 weeks, awesome. If it takes a month, that's cool. So, but thank you. For some feedback. Cool. Yeah, and sorry if I cut you off at all, but yeah, if you have any more comments, please feel free to speak up. So I think as far as GSOC goes, COPS is not a good target, but we want to keep working in that direction. Prakash is already working with interns. If they need support with packaging or add-on related concerns, they can come here for some help. And as far as manifest bundles, this is certainly, in my view, one of the most important things that we could get out of this sub-project. So let's keep using whatever bandwidth we have available there. Certainly a lot of interoperability that we could get with COPS, Kubernetes, Flux, I think lots of, and then with Artifact Hub. So potentially we could have some derivative work there, not the main core stuff, but things that are related to bundle ecosystem by summer seems possible. And yeah, cool. Well, there's nothing urgent that needs to happen towards Summer of Code, but it's really good that we've got a heartbeat on that. Really terrific to see everyone. Nick, I was actually curious about revisiting this question. I missed last week's meeting and was just curious what the outcome of this question of putting multiple versions of packages into a single container could look like, or why you brought this up.
Well, I brought it up because the current format that can't remember the name of the repo right now, but the declarative config pattern, I believe, or declarative operator pattern is essentially a package with a bunch of versions in it of different manifests, and the manifest bundle describes a single instance of that thing. So the current operators are geared to consume that. And I think the outcome of the meeting was that the straw man would include like both options for a single version per manifest bundle, and another one for, you know, making that a composite pattern with like multiple bundles in a single manifest bundle, so that we could like compare and contrast.
All right, yeah, thanks for satisfying my curiosity there. It does make sense to me that depending on the use case, you might be interested in one or the other. And if there's space in the way that these bundles are consumed to specify which version of the package you intend to use beyond the tag of the image that you're actually consuming, then that seems sensible to me. I don't see, though, why you couldn't also just publish the same image to a registry under multiple tags. They'd kind of be syncing the metadata of what's inside the image with the metadata that's actually consumable in the registry, so that what you would download would kind of be this like larger image containing multiple versions, but addressable in that tag specific way. And that would allow you to like also tag something as a release channel potentially. So there's a lot of options here.
Yeah,
you can see that working pretty well with the source controller custom resources. All of that stuff sounds pretty reasonable to me. So, the clients would, you know, if you wanted to use that kind of, if you wanted to take advantage of the hashing and like that happens inside of an image registry, the client would likely benefit from some sort of image store cache or layer cache. So, which I feel like that is probably inherently how an OCI client works for layer pulls. Cool.
I think with OCI, you get some more options than you do with the Docker container as well. Like, for instance, custom media types, right? So like I can store manifests in a manifest list with a different media type than, for instance, with Docker images, we have to use a file system to do that, right? We'd have to have them all be media types that Docker understands, and we're restricted by a file system. So like there are a lot of things I think the manifest bundle KEP needs to be updated to consider OCI as well. So
yeah, that is certainly, yeah, you would end up, you know, having libraries that would have like an in-memory file system as a fallback, and then that restricts where you can run, or as a fallback, you know, for when you're in an environment where you can't run with a file system, and that's maybe undesirable. And when you could have that more elegant design, like you mentioned with the media types. Yeah, and even just having a tarball in general, like not needing that to store a couple of objects. So. And this registry support, for hosting these types of alternative things is improving, and the Helm folks have kind of started off on a path that's blazing a trail for maybe people like this group to follow along and also adopt the OCI spec, the parts of it that aren't normally used. So,
yeah, is there an available image registry, OCI image registry right now that we could use? Should we define manifest bundle in OCI?
That's a really good question. I imagine that the projects that we would want to target POCing would be using the upstream opens, like the distribution project that Docker originally created, that most other registries are based off of. Or if we wanted something like more concrete, we could look at like using Harbor to prototype off of. And Harbor is kind of an interesting opportunity, like beyond just the core bits of the registry API and how to interact with it properly. There is all of the other stuff in Harbor, like the user interface and that kind of thing. It'd be interesting to see how that stuff kind of surfaces. Yeah, Justin, do you know if we can push OCI stuff that's not a Docker image to GCR?
What do you mean by an OCI image? Like, what are the gaps that are needed beyond what, say, GCR gives you? Like, forgive my ignorance here.
It's a
custom media type
question.
support. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, yeah, you said it. So just like as some context for people who would very reasonably not be aware, is that a Docker image is like roughly compatible with the OCI spec for container images, and the image is marked with several layers of media types, and in a container image you have these layers that are marked as these tarballs, and then the actual contents of those layers then get unpacked onto the file system. So it's yeah, so right here in the OCI format section, this Docker image manifest version 2 schema 2 format, supporting, Docker images with this format is something that almost all cloud registries have adopted. But what gets a little bit challenging is, and then there's also this image indexes thing, which is useful for like the multi-arch support. So like sometimes that takes a while for a new image registry when they provide a service to have these image indexes. So these kinds of extensions beyond just using tarballs as a media type, you start to get into an area of like the OCI spec where the registry just has like no implemented support for things that are allowed in the spec, but that not a lot of people use. probably a question of like, can I host like a Helm OCI image on GCR? You know, would be indicative of like whether or not that kind of thing would work on that cloud infra. But you'll have the most freedom, you know, prototyping on top of the distribution projects, you know, bare server. That will be the most up-to-date implementation, the most flexible. I don't know if that's helpful at all, Nick, but yeah.
I mean, at the very least, we can, if there is a way to push to a GCR registry, we can test it. Like we can construct an image with a random media type or a custom media type, and then try to push it and pull it, make sure it works. If it's not clear from the docs.
Yeah, and Nick, if you, I don't know whether you have the structure of it is that there is every Kubernetes project gets a staging GCR repo, which is not considered particularly secure, and they get a production GCR repo, and there's a sort of fairly involved or auditable promotion process involving PRs. Our cloud build job should be able to push to that staging GCR repo. And we can probably also give you access to push to it directly, although that's a little bit less good. I don't know if you have access to a GCR repo anyway, but we could probably just put it in the cloud build job if you want to. But we can probably also figure out that.
Sorry, this is all very new to me in terms of like the cloud build, the staging and production GCR repos. Are there any docs describing them so I can like better understand what's going on there?
There definitely are. This is all the production or the provisioning of these repos is done under the auspices of the working group Kate's Infra, WG Kate's Infra, and they have a Git repo which is very confusingly named as this, which I will paste and then read out: github.com/kubernetes/kates.io. And in there, you should be able to see, well, at least how those happen. I don't know if we have docs on how to use those things. Yeah, this directory is reasonable to read me here. Sort of reasonable. It's very focused on the working group Kate's Infra perspective instead of the consumer perspective, but if you sort of read it with the other mindset, you can sort of figure out what's going on, I think. But yes, essentially we can push to the staging repo more or less arbitrarily because it's not considered a security boundary. And then there is the security boundary happens during the promotion when we create a PR that lists the manifests and SHAs that we want to promote. If you have access to a GCR repo, you can try. I would personally just try it. If you don't, you can probably send up a PR and I can try pushing it for you if you want.
Yeah, the only thing that's going to be interesting is that like I'm not sure. So if this depends on like using a Docker file or some other format to build an image from a file system, we may not be able to build images using that job in the way that I'm thinking that we want to.
That's interesting. Yes. So it doesn't matter
in cloud
how
build. Yeah, you should be able to do whatever you want.
Okay.
And yeah, it's basically a CI runner. So you can put whatever tools you want in a container image and use it. But as far as just publishing to GCR, like whether or not GCR will accept a container image that has these alternative media type sections is up for question as to, I don't know the answer to that.
And it's also not, if we are the first people ever to promote one of these, let's call it a little bit different images, it's not clear that the promoter, which is our own code, Kubernetes code, will be able to cope with it, but obviously we can extend it or fix any bugs that we encounter.
Okay, cool. That sounds like a an action item on the path to defining OCI manifest bundles. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we don't need to use those special things. We could do it just like a Docker. We could have it essentially just be OCI version of the Docker image, Docker v22. But it would be nice to actually use the features of OCI to make an image that doesn't need all this extra stuff, like a layered file system and tar balls and what have you.
Yeah, and there may be room for both implementations depending on the amount of flexibility of what you want to actually store inside the manifest bundle. Like if it's literally just manifests, you can see why that would be super attractive. But even just with the next step, which is like packaging something like a customized directory, this is just not really like how do you represent the file system to customize is important for the customized build to work, right? And similarly, you'll find the same issue with other configuration management, things. So wherever you are in the pipeline, if you have the manifest bundle spec that only stores objects, then that has to be the target of some CI job that produces it in the manifest generation workflow. But if you want a bundle to be able to hold a package of something non-trivial where the file system is actually important, then the Docker v22 compliant images may be a good fit for that. So it's, there might be space for both.
Basically, you're hinting at the fact that the content of the bundle has an implication for how it is used and applied, and has a coupling with the type of bundle that we use, right? So like there would be a bundle for, let's say, Helm, or a bundle, like if Helm didn't have its own format already, or customize or queue or etc. Because they depend on different things. Some depend on file systems, others do not.
Yeah, the Helm point is a great example. There's no real blocking reason why you could not already use a Docker v22 image to store a Helm chart. If we supported Docker v2 images as a source in source controller, then you would be able to use that as to do a Helm release. Because the file system is generic, and almost all of these tools support unpacking some package from a folder on a file system. So it's a very generic, like blunt hammer. But then the Helm team chose because they saw a benefit in packaging using these media types for Helm charts. And we could have one of those, specifically for like a bunch of Kubernetes objects, right? And that could be more minimal. It would use less space. It wouldn't have as complex of a code path for unpacking that artifact. And it'd have less dependencies. So that there's definitely an attractive thing there. It's like, do we also build one of those for customize? Or how much of this is reusable between the different tools that are going to be, maybe interested in using these kinds of things as a package? And then what is the implication of that on a client, that's looking to consume these things?
If I may, I wanted to mention one thing, which is, I think it's related to what you said. There's a difficult trade-off. Like suppose like when we talk about image registries as the preferred format or as a good format, I think implicit there is the idea that everyone's already running an image registry and therefore we should leverage it. I think if we start saying, but you have to run an image registry that supports this potential feature that maybe not everyone supports, newer feature, how about that? It may reduce the argument in favor of image registries. So that's one thing. But on the other hand, like we need, if no one ever adopts like some of these more advanced, if no one ever adopts OCI image format in its general form, then none of the image registries will ever support it. So there's a trade-off between sort of leading the, we're getting reach and then leading the industry towards this new use case. And I like the idea of, I don't know whether there are any other users today of OCI that that go beyond the Docker spec, but it's an interesting trade-off, and I like the idea of going for it. Particularly if we don't have to, if GCR supports it and we don't have to like figure out how to do something there, because that would be a little bit inconvenient.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
Aside from Helm, I'm not aware of other folks who are using OCI in this way as a large community effort. What about you, Nick?
We've always been trying to go there. I think, I don't know if you guys are aware, but like Quay is a Red Hat product under the hood. And I think OCI, custom media types in OCI have been like on the agenda for like 2 years now, or as long as I can remember. You know, I don't know how many actual services have that implemented yet or would. The point that Justin brings up about like compatibility with existing Docker images is something I think we've talked about before and was like the spirit of the original KEP. And it almost makes me think like we want a meta, we just want to use like whatever the current ubiquitous thing is as like the abstract container, and we define our format to capture everything. Like let's just say we zip up whatever you have in a tarball and that goes inside the image. And so now the tarball is the thing that's the, or whatever like custom format we design that can wrap the things that we want to apply. Can be either stored in the file system, or it can be stored in a manifest list, or it can be stored, you know, in a file server. Like maybe that going that direction is the one way we could save ourselves pain in the future with OCI Docker supremacy.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest or one of the most motivating things is like it's compatibility from two different perspectives when you're talking about just using Docker v22, the tarball style image, right? Is you have compatibility with the ecosystem of tools. If people want to store some sort of structured data that's used by some tool later on, and then you have compatibility with all of the registry infrastructure that happens to be out there. And then it's like you're asking yourself a little bit of like, okay, well, what are the benefits of not going that direction? And I think the benefits are largely like mechanical. There's also probably some indexing benefits from using a proper media type. But definitely mechanical benefits from the client side in terms of simpler code path, less dependencies. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons, or pretty good picture of why that's a good option to support, regardless of whether we do move, you know, beyond and do something that takes advantage of these other OCI specification properties. it might be interesting to hear what some of the OCI spec contributors think about this approach. I'm sure that the Helm folks probably spoke to them, or some of those team members were part of writing that spec. So probably an opportunity for some opinions there. Yeah, ultimately there are definitely benefits of going beyond the Docker spec. It's just a question of compatibility. Satoshi had to drive off. Good to see her. Anyway, yeah, we have had quite a long meeting today of good discussion. Thanks so much. Does anyone have other things that they wanted to bring up before we convene and go into async feedback mode on this? Nice.
All right.
Well, as always, feel free to append the agenda for the next time we meet. And yeah, we're always available in the Cluster Addons channel. So let's keep the discussion flowing.
Thanks a lot, everyone. And see you again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.